Hello, I'm Jonathan Miller, a partner with the Monadeo Group and co-practice leader of the hospital team. Today, I'm joined by Paul Mayer, an executive vice president who oversees the compliance solution team. And we're going to be focusing on some changes to the compliance program and social service law. And Paul's going to take a deep dive into that. So, Paul, what changes have occurred recently in the compliance program world?
Well, we've had some substantial changes dating back to April of 2020, where along with the laws of New York State, the Social Service Law 363-D, which mandates compliance program, was amended and updated the requirements for mandatory compliance programs. To coincide with the law change and law amendments from April 2020, the New York State Office of Medicaid Inspector General has updated their compliance program regulations, Title 18, Part 521 of the New York State Codes and Rules and Regulations. Those went into effect and were finalized December 28th, 2022.
All right. What are some other important dates that the organizations need to be aware of?
So the key date that everybody needs to be aware of is we have that December 28th, 2022 date where things were finalized and made effective for compliance program requirements at Title 18, Part 521 regulations. OMIG, Office of Medicaid Inspector General, has now said March 28th, 2023 is when enforcement actions can start. So we have a window to get compliant with those regulations. March 28th, 2023 is the key date.
So when I think about my hospitals, a lot of them have very high functioning compliance programs. They have compliance officers, they do annual plans, they have risk assessment, they have compliance committees of the board. The compliance officer reports directly to the board of directors. So what are some of the key changes in the changes in this law that they need to be aware of and make sure the changes are in place by March 28th, 2023?
Right. So some of the key changes that will impact most, if not all, organizations that are the required providers to follow these regulations and the law include, and you mentioned some of these things people already have, but it's now formalizing those, getting specific policies and procedures in place. A compliance committee, yes, it's required. OMIG, Office of Medicaid Inspector General, has defined who sits on those committees, senior leadership. It defines how often that compliance committee needs to meet, quarterly. It defines another requirement for compliance committee is having a charter that's reviewed on an annual basis. So there's some specifics in the regulations that people need to be aware of, and that's one key one. Another one is assessing the overall effectiveness of a compliance program. It has to be done on an annual basis. And OMIG goes a step further in that effectiveness review and says they want to see a plan. They want to see what methodology is going to be in place to determine an overall effectiveness review of your compliance program. They give guidance as they expect some interviews, they expect site visits, and surveys and other metrics that maybe the organization would find helpful in determining that effectiveness of a compliance program. And another thing along with that overall effectiveness is policies and procedures. Your compliance policies and procedures also have an effectiveness component built in these regulations. You now are required to have certain policies and procedures. Take it a next step further. Are those policies and procedures being followed, and are they effective? Those are critical components, I think.
Yeah, it kind of sounds when they say effective, a compliance program, it's actually really subjective. And I know the folks I deal with in the compliance world really like things to be objective, like to be told what to do. Is there some sort of checklist or some sort of roadmap map that they can follow to make sure that they're getting ready?
Yeah, well, OMIG used to put out, Office of Medicaid Inspector General used to publish a self-assessment tool for every organization to utilize before they submit their attestation that their compliance program satisfies the law and satisfies the regulation. OMIG removed that from their website. However, they just recently, a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, published a guidance document of what their expectations are within the regulations. It for sure is not a one size fits all when determining effectiveness. What's effective for this hospital may not be effective for another hospital or health system or this provider type or that provider type. not a one size fits all. So they have to convene their compliance committee and come up with a plan of, okay, what information do they need to determine what is effective for them, and how are they going to use that information, and how are they going to assess what that means for their individual organization. Determining effectiveness is not a kind of a checklist thing. It's taking data, analyzing data, and saying, is this working for us?
So unfortunately for those that love things black and white, we got to be able to live in the gray. So
Right.
what, an organization really from when this law went into effect to when it's going to be enforced have 90 days. So what should an organization be doing right now to prepare for the enforcement of these regulations?
Right. Right now, it's critical to go through those regulations point by point by point, compare it to the old regulations, compare it to what you currently have in place, because many organizations already have a fully functioning, effective compliance program. Now, the key component in these regulations is what is the specifics in there that maybe you haven't addressed yet. For example, I mentioned the compliance committee charter. Okay, you have a compliance committee, it meets quarterly, it includes your senior leadership, but you don't have a committee charter. You don't review that charter on an annual basis. So be careful of what's in the regulations and make sure you go point by point by point to make sure that you're addressing, kind of that low hanging fruit for an audit. Do you have this? Did you do this? Did you do this? And make sure that you have a clear understanding of what's in those regulations. Because just like any other program regulation or set of regulations, what's in those compliance program regulations is fair game and audit time.
All right. Thank you, Paul. Very informative. If individuals have more questions, how can they reach you?
They certainly can go to our bonadio.com website, look for Paul Mayer, look for compliance solutions. They can ask any number of contact people, such as John Miller, and we'll find a way to get in touch with you.
All right.
We just reach out.
All right. Thank you very much, Paul. Appreciate it very much.
Thanks, John.